And with that, I want to introduce our guest today, talking to us about digital accessibility from multiple perspectives, simple steps to get started. This is Linda Kite Scott. Linda, hi, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good. How are you?
Hey, I'm fantastic. It's a beautiful Thursday with decent weather. And so for that, I'm glad to be
Yes, absolutely. Same here.
getting off work after this. But I would like to, before we get into the kind of topic, I'd love to learn a little bit more about you. So who are you and what do you want us to know?
Well, okay. In addition to all of the other things that you might have read in my bio, I'm a learner and a connector. I'm a doctoral candidate and I love learning. And so as an instructional designer with a background in instructional technology and accessibility certification, I love connecting people with the tools and information that can help them be better and do better.
And so I mentioned briefly earlier that you do work at a Skill Up Technologies. Mm-hmm. Could you tell us a little bit about that and what you do there?
Yes. Skill Up Technologies is actually two companies. We have Skill Up Online and Skill Up Technologies. Skill Up Online has online learning that anybody can go register for and take classes. And then Skill Up Technologies is where we do most of our projects. And so I'm an instructional designer and technical writer. One of the projects I'm working on right now is designing learning materials for a certification program that a major technology company will be deploying pretty soon. And so we're putting together 7 courses for this certification program, and all kinds of lessons and hands-on activities are part of each of those courses that lead up to certification for these learners in a technology area. And then they can then become certified in this particular area. I know it's kind of vague, but I don't want to give away too many details about who the company is or what it's for, but that's the kind of thing that we do in the projects that we work on. We work with universities and technology companies to help design some of their online training and digital content.
I think that's so interesting, because so often the conversation about accessibility ends up being plopped right in the lap of higher education, and mm-hmm. we don't as often push it out into the world of industry. So it's cool mm-hmm. to hear that you're bringing some of that accessibility know-how into things that touch e-learning and industry. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So I'm excited to see how that perspective comes through in the steps you're going to offer us. Mm-hmm. So how and when were you first introduced to the idea of UDL and accessibility?
So after I got my master's degree, I went to work for Texas A&M University, Texarkana, as an instructional technologist with the IT department. And I worked with our instructors. Originally, I worked with them, helping them learn to use the technology tools that we had for the campus. And then I transitioned into instructional designer. From there, I became an accessibility coordinator. But let me back up for just a second to being the instructional technologist. As the instructional technologist, I saw the need for accessibility in the online courses. And one of the first workshops that I attended in higher ed was a UDL workshop. And I fell in love with the idea of universal design and saw how it could address, most of the issues that we were facing. And so I've been passionate about accessibility in UDL since. So that passion about accessibility led me to become an accessibility coordinator for Texas A&M University, Texarkana. And in the state of Texas, all of the state schools have an accessibility coordinator. It's a state mandated position. And I served on the accessibility, my mind just went blank as it could be, committee for the Texas A&M system. And one of the things that we did that I'm really proud of was design a comprehensive accessibility training program that is now deployed to all of the Texas A&M institutions. And one of the things that I was pushing for before I left A&M was for that to become mandatory for our institution. And just a couple of months ago, they did make it mandatory. So
that's amazing. You do not hear that happen. I was just in a meeting earlier for the International Ally User Group, and one of the questions we asked was, does your institution have ally training? And the answers for yes, and it's mandatory. Out of 40 people, three institutions had mandatory training. So way to go, Texas A&M, just to call out, and way to go, you for helping get that wheel in motion. So obviously your background is deeply entrenched in these ideas. And I know when we first started talking about this session, you had said you wanted to offer people easy ways to get started, because that's the hardest part, especially considering digital accessibility, because it seems so vast. I love that you propose kind of a 3-step approach. So with that, I'm going to kind of let you talk about those 3 facets and do what you do. And if we get any questions in the Q&A, everybody, you can put questions in the Q&A. If we get to stopping points or pausing points where those questions are relevant, I will certainly go ahead and ask those. But Linda, the floor is yours.
Okay, well, thank you. Well, yeah, when we were talking about that and we kind of talked about the 3 facets, that's kind of, once I started putting together the handout that I did today, it kind of morphed into 2 sets of 3 facets. And so the first set wasn't something that we talked about, but I thought about how people think about this when they first become aware that accessibility is an issue. And so that was actually the first of the 3 facets, was awareness, and then evaluation and implementation. And then the second 3 facets are practitioner perspective, tool perspective, and procurement perspective. So with awareness, you need to become familiar with digital accessibility and the needs of people with disabilities. One of the things I don't like doing is throwing out numbers and ratios and things like that. But this one is big. 1 in 5 people have some kind of disability. And that's huge. That's a huge number. And so when you think about that, there are a lot of people who may need a little help using some of the tools that we use in the digital environment. And so becoming aware of that and what some of those disabilities are helps you understand why this is important. And then the next thing is evaluation. When you buy something, when you buy a software, you need to evaluate it for accessibility and now security. But there are tools that help you evaluate these things for accessibility. And so understanding that you do need to evaluate the things that you're going to buy, because if you are promoting something and you're using something in your environment and it doesn't meet accessibility guidelines, then you kind of put yourself at risk for complaints. And so we'll talk about tools a little later on that help with those evaluations. But things to be aware of, to check for, are like color contrast, using alternate text for your images and graphics, captions for videos, and closed caption for audio. And then the third is implementation. You want to make sure that your digital content is accessible. And so this might involve changes to the design, content, or code of your website or application. And you may need to work with developers or designers or content creators to ensure that accessibility is integrated throughout the entire development process. It's not an afterthought. It's something that needs to be thought about from from the get-go, so that it is ingrained in that process, and that it's always part of that process. And soon it becomes second nature. You just automatically start thinking about it at every step of the way. And so, practitioner perspective, and this is when I'm fixing to share a document and kind of walk through some things. But one of the big questions is, who is responsible for creating accessible digital content? Well, that's us. You and I, everyone. We are all responsible for ensuring the accessibility of the content we create. So who are practitioners? Again, you and I, we're all practitioners. If you create digital content, you're a practitioner. So do you email people? Sure you do. You're creating digital content when you email people. And so practitioners aren't just limited to what people might think of as the professionals in the field, web designers and web developers and designers and content creators. We're all practitioners. And so some of the pitfalls that we talk about as practitioners is lack of awareness. And so again, that's one of the really big things. And once you start becoming aware, it just opens doors to all kinds of solutions. I mean, you can go down all kinds of rabbit trails when you start looking for accessibility solutions. Planning, we touched on this, in implementation. Accessibility needs to be considered from the beginning of the design, and again, not an afterthought. So poor planning could result in significant accessibility issues. And then again, you kind of set yourself up for risk for things that are harder to fix later on and more expensive.
I was going to say, we all know that remediation is the most horrible word to hear, because it's going to cost time and it's going to cost money, and time is money. Yep. So yeah.
I mean, a quick search of accessibility lawsuits is mind-boggling if you haven't done that. I mean, Harvard, MIT, Penn, they all paid huge fines and penalties for inaccessible content. And so insufficient testing, we want to be sure that we test everything that we're using to make sure that it is as accessible as we can get it. Lack of collaboration. I know sometimes people feel like they're on an island by themselves, but find you a team to work with, and collaboration between designers and content creators, instructional designers. Most campuses now do have accessibility specialists, and so that's somebody you can reach out to partner with. So.
When you say collaboration, do you feel like also that collaboration should go beyond the people who think they are content creators and
Yes.
into the people who don't know that they are yet content creators?
Absolutely.
Because people think, the accessibility team, it's the people that are the instructional designers, it's the
right.
accessibility specialist, the faculty, maybe if you're in an institution that has moved that far ahead with any accessibility initiatives, but you forget about the marketing team. Like in higher ed, you forget about the student facing documents from registrar, from students have to access that too.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the things, before I left A&M, we were deploying a new website. And so one of the things that we did, we built accessibility into the plan from the beginning. And part of that was the website's a little more locked down now. Everybody doesn't have access, but if you do have access to put things on that website, you've gone through accessibility training. That's part of the requirement. So that the marketing people that basically on the website, they know that anybody that gets access to put content on the website now has to have that accessibility training, and documents have to be checked and approved before they go on the site. And that's, again, you really have to think about building that in from the beginning.
Mhm.
And you want to reach out to your end users as well, and find out if things are working for them. That's part of that collaborative process too, is including those end users. And then another pitfall would be incomplete solutions. We might focus on making our LMS accessible, but not think about some of the other software that we're using, maybe CAD or something in engineering or nursing program, or in corporate. You might think you might have your CMS accessible, but then maybe forget about some of the other point of sale solutions that you're using. So you want to make sure you're robust in your solutions. And then this one, I mean, we all suffer from this one: lack of resources. We all suffer from not enough time. Maybe we don't have the support that we need. Maybe we don't know who to go to for helping me with procurement or things like that. And in that handout are a list of resources and websites that you can go to find out about accessibility and universal design. CAST is probably it is, in my opinion, the best place to go for help with universal design, because CAST is the one who created universal design back in the late 90s, mid 90s. So I'm going to share my screen now and walk through a couple of things.
Yes, thank you. And while you're doing that, we did actually have a question from Mary Colleen Jenkins, who wanted to know if you could share a link to the Texas A&M training that you spearheaded, or any resources around that training.
I don't know if that training is available publicly, but I will find that out. If you
I can always put a link on the recording
Yeah.
page along with this file that you shared with us earlier. Yep. So I will, Mary Colleen, we will check into that for you.
Absolutely. So one of the things I wanted to show everybody was how easy some of these tools make it for you to create accessible content. And Microsoft has done one of the best jobs with this, because if you know how to use one Microsoft tool, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, the accessibility checker is the same across the platforms. I mean, their ribbon is across the same. I mean, it's the same across most of their platforms. And can y'all see this document I'm sharing? Okay, good. So Microsoft's built in.
I'm sorry, Linda, one small housekeeping thing. I apologize. The attendee chat was turned off. It is turned on now, but please ensure that you're putting your questions in the Q&A, which we have another one for when we get to the evaluation step. But also attendees, please feel free to chat amongst yourself and share resources, because that's what this is all about too. So be as lively as you'd like in that chat, as long as you keep it respectful. And I'm sorry to interrupt you, Linda, please.
Oh, you're fine. Absolutely fine. So Microsoft's accessibility checker really is quite miraculous, I think, because it can help you fix so many of the accessibility issues in your documents. And so the accessibility checker is in the review tab, and it is right here where it says check accessibility. You can also put it on your quick access if you want to, but it is located in the review tab in all of the Microsoft ribbons. And so when you have your document open, all you do is go to the accessibility checker and click on check accessibility, and it opens over here to the right in a new little pane. And this document is purposefully not accessible so that I can show you the things that it's going to tell you.
Linda, are you working in the desktop app or the?
Yes.
And what are you on, the newest version?
Yes.
Okay.
But the accessibility checker is in the review tab on almost all the latest versions of Word or Microsoft tools. And if for some reason, if you don't see it, then go to your quick quick tools, and that is not it. And let me find my quick tools. There we go. And so if you go to, I'm still not in the right place. Customize the ribbon. Customize the ribbon, and then go to all commands. You will see accessibility checker right here, and then you can add it.
That's so handy to have
Yeah.
it right up there at the top.
And so mine is still not showing like I would expect it to. But I'm not going to let that jam us up.
So yeah, I think you could follow that. You can follow that process for sure.
So the accessibility checker is telling us we've got some errors over here. We are missing some descriptions. So picture 2, which actually is picture 1. I'm going to blow this up for a second because I want to say a little something about this. I like to use this picture when I talk about digital accessibility, because seeing something like steps is tangible, but when you talk about digital accessibility, that's not really something tangible that you can like hold in your hand or see or touch. So if somebody was in a wheelchair or was using crutches, or a mom with a stroller, or somebody with a rolling cart, they could not get from here to there.
That's a pretty steep set of stairs.
Those are an impediment to those people. And you know, the mom with a stroller, person with a rolling cart, they don't have a disability, but this is still an impediment to them. And so we have another image here. This is Robson Square in Vancouver, Canada, and they have built ramps into the steps that lead from the lower level up to the buildings. And so they call these stramps. It's kind of funny. But the people in wheelchairs or on crutches can now navigate from here to there without any problem. Also, this is going to benefit that mom with a stroller or that person with a rolling cart. And so I compare this to captions and alt text. When you have a video that has captions, then the person that's hearing impaired can watch that video and get the same information that the hearing person can. And so that is universal design. It equalizes things for those people with disabilities, but it also helps other people. And so when you think about universal design, it makes learning available to the broadest audience possible.
Without detracting, which I think is something that a lot of people, well, oh my gosh, then if you're going to have captions, that's going to distract me. But that's why you have the option to turn captions on or off, or those steps that you just showed, the stramps. That's certainly not a detract. Not only does it help people, it's also quite lovely. And I think that's something that we forget too, is that a universal design can be elegant as well as effective.
Yeah, absolutely can. And universal design was originally physical. It was the architect that originally brought it to being did it for the soldiers returning from war that had disabilities. So that's kind of how it came to be. But then in the 90s, the folks at CAST got together. They were working in a children's hospital, and so they wanted to make things better for those children in that hospital with disabilities. And so that is how universal design in the digital environment came to be. And universal design will take care of the majority of the accessibility issues. It doesn't cover accommodations. So if you've got people that need extra time or need like covered overlays for dyslexia, things like that, it doesn't take care of those, but it takes care of a lot of issues that would require accommodations that we don't think about.
And I think it also preps, especially with, if you have a solid document, you have a solid piece of digital content, it's going to be much easier for things that are becoming more standard, like Beeline Reader or Immersive Reader, that help with those other accommodations. Well, it can do more with these good documents than it can with a bad document.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, our accessibility checkers found some issues. It's telling us that picture 1, there's a couple things wrong with it. First, it doesn't have a description. And so you can take care of this 2 different ways. You can add a description, and you want your description to be brief. I'm just going to put steps leading to a building. And that might not be a good enough description for this one, but that's just how you would put the alt text in there when Microsoft provides that pane to you. You might be a little more descriptive. You don't want to be very long, because when the person using a screen reader, and that's what the alt text is for, somebody using a screen reader, when they get to that picture, it's going to tell them what that is a picture of. The other way that you can take care of this is to mark it as decorative. The only reason you would want to mark it as decorative is if it had no significance to the content. I mean, if it was truly there just for decoration, you can mark it as decorative. But if it has some relevance to that content, it needs to have alt text so that when that reader gets to the image, they will understand why that image is relevant to the material that they're reading. And so we've got that one there, and see that picture 2 went away. So that one's no longer an issue. We've got picture 1. I'm just going to mark that one as decorative, and see it immediately goes away. We've got some other warnings, reading order, and that is about the table. But before we get to the table, I want to talk about a couple of things that Microsoft, the accessibility checker, didn't catch. And another thing that you want to do when you're creating documents is to use the styles. You want to use headings so that when that screen reader is reading this document for that visually impaired person, they can scan that document if you've used headings. Like you and I, we can scroll through this and we can scan right there and we can see what's in there. But if we're visually impaired and we're having to use a screen reader, you don't want to sit there and listen to that screen reader read everything on this page for you to get to where you want to get to. And so using your styles allows that screen reader to hop from one item to the next. And so we've got a title, and that's what the screen reader will do. It'll tell them that's the title. And then we've got headings. And you see you've got headings 1, 2, and 3. You want to use them in order. And that's the thing that the accessibility checker didn't catch, because I've got a heading 2 before a heading 1. And that will not help the person using a screen reader navigate these documents. So if you're going to use a heading 2, you want to be sure there's a heading 1 before it. But that screen reader, they can use that screen reader to skip from heading to heading, and it'll tell them what's in that section. So again, they can scan it electronically just like we would scan it visually. Another thing that the screen reader didn't catch, the accessibility checker didn't catch, was this URL. when you have a URL in your document, it should be hyperlinked. So if this sentence said, navigate to Google and search for blah, blah, blah. Well, if we had it this way, if we said navigate to HTTPS, that's exactly what the screen reader is going to read. And there's some long URLs out there, and I would not want to have to sit there and listen to something read that whole thing. So if you hyperlink your text, so you just type your word here, and then you select it and right click it. First, let me copy this. Select it, right click it, and go down to link.
Always good to copy your URL first. Yeah.
And I put a comma in there extra, so let me get that out. Just pop that in there and say okay. And so now we've got a hyperlink. And when the screen reader gets to that, it will just say link to Google. It won't read that URL to the person. And let's see. Another thing it caught about the picture was that it's not in line with the text. And so that is something that you would want to do. I know some folks say, well, I can't be as creative if I do that. And to some extent that may be true. But if you line this up with your text, you can still left, center, or right justify your image. And you can center it in the paper if you want to. But for that person using a screen reader, having that image in line with the text puts it at the place where it needs to be for that screen reader to tell that person. So if it wasn't in line with the text, then it would not tell the person what this picture was at the right point in the document, if that makes sense.
Like it would interrupt a paragraph to tell them what the picture was and then continue on with the paragraph, which could be very
Or it may not even tell them about the picture until it got to the end of the document. Because it wasn't in line with the text. So different screen readers perform a little differently, but none of them would read it right if it wasn't in line with the text. And so now we've got an issue with our table. First, it's telling us to check the reading order. And to check your reading order, if you will just put your cursor in the table and hit the tab button, you can see that it goes from left to right and top to bottom. And so our reading order is okay. Something that's probably not okay, and we want to check the table properties for this. Select your table and go to table properties. There's two things we want here. We want alt text in this table. And so you would put your title here. I'm just going to call this one schedule. And a short description here. Again, it's similar to alt text. You just want it brief but descriptive so that the person knows what this table is. And then our rows, you want this box checked, repeat as header row, because, and then we'll just click OK. When that screen reader gets to this table, if we didn't have that box checked, it would read through this table and it would read date, time, location, 4:27, 10 o'clock. What checking that box does is allows that screen reader to tell the person that this is in the date column. So it has relevance. If it just went through the table reading the information that was in there, it may not be relevant because they don't know which column or row that was in. And so this helps your reader understand that when it reads this, that's reading something out of that date column. I mean, tables are all different. We all have different reasons for using them, but usually you have a header up here that's telling somebody what's in that column. And so we can see it.
We have a comment in the chat to avoid tables, and sometimes they are not avoidable. But one thing that I see a lot that maybe speaks to this comment, is people using tables for pretty, for looks, as opposed to really using them for tabular data, right?
Yes.
And so that avoiding tables is, if it's not really tabular data that needs to be structured in that way, don't use a table just to organize some pictures. And I think that's something that people don't think through sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
then, the other thing,
oh,
if you're converting your Word document into a PDF, if you don't fix your table before you convert it to PDF, it's really hard to fix once you get into that PDF. So then you got to go back to your Word document, fix it, and recreate your PDF, because Adobe has a built-in accessibility checker. There's a lot you can fix in there. Tables is not one of them.
Not easily. Do you mind it? We actually have a question around that about the PDF. If your Microsoft Word file passes muster, does it lose its accessibility when you transcode it to PDF? Do you know if the alt text carries over to the PDF file?
Yes, the alt text will carry over. And if you're using tables, that information will carry over. There are some things, and it's not that something's not carrying over, but the way PDFs are formatted differently, there are tags in PDFs. And that's a 4-letter word, let me tell you.
And I think also, if you have it, they seem to move smoother if you use the tools. Like if you have Adobe Pro and Microsoft, you typically will have a link in there that says like save as PDF or create PDF, as opposed to just going in and changing the file name, which doesn't do any of that conversion, that kind of interpretation.
Yeah. No, if you save it as a PDF, the accessibility measures that you took in Word, they're going to carry over, but there are some things that are just inherent to Adobe. And the biggest one is tags. And that's a whole nother.
Yeah, so that's a whole nother webinar.
That's a long webinar too.
Yes, several of them. Actually, you can find a lot of that on LinkedIn Learning if you want to go down that rabbit hole, just FYI. Okay, so we do have some other questions, but they're maybe a little more pertinent to later down the road. I do have one that says, what about using a table to create a fill in the blank form?
Fill in the blank form. If I was going to do something like that, I would probably use one of the tools that is meant to do something like that. Like in Google, they have Google Forms. Microsoft has one, and I can't remember if it's Forms or not.
Yeah, it's just Forms, Microsoft Forms.
Okay. So yeah, if I was going to do that, I would do it in something like that that's formatted to do something.
Because then you're not fighting the navigation issues of a table on top of the fill in the blank issues of getting the tooltips right and making sure people can actually fill out the form. That's like 2 issues that would fight quite a bit. Yeah. Okay, I think those are all of our pertinent questions for the moment. So thank you, Linda. Carry on. Okay.
And then another issue that we have here in this document is hard to read text contrast. And not only is color contrast an issue, but actually use of color can be an issue. One of the things Universal Design holds to is that you don't use color alone to draw attention to something, because there are more colorblind people in this world than you can imagine. And so if you've got a sentence and you've made one of the words red because you want somebody to know that that particular word is important, if somebody had red color blindness, they wouldn't even see that word. And so you want to use other ways to draw attention to important words. by bolding them, italicizing them, maybe making them a little different size, putting them in quotations, or putting the word important in front of it, or a note in front of it, something like that. But don't use color just to draw attention to something. And then the other thing is color contrast. People with low vision would not see this word right here, should meet. So they would see color contrast and a big gap and ratio guidelines. And so there are color checkers on the market that will tell you whether or not the two colors you're using meet those contrast ratio guidelines. And Microsoft has just given us the opportunity to change the font color. Sorry about that. I changed it and I didn't mean to. But let's check again. And it looks like that color may not even be. Yeah, it doesn't even like that color. I keep clicking the wrong button. So now we've changed it to a color that meets accessibility guidelines. We still have a red color there though, and that might be difficult again for somebody with red color blindness. So instead of using a color here, we could bold and italicize that word and leave it black, and it would still have that significance. You know, somebody reading that say, oh, should meet, okay. But that person with red color blindness may not see that if we left it red. And I know there's times, you know, you've got to use colors, but you just want to be a little careful about how you're using the color.
Yeah, I know this is one of those topics in the accessibility community that has a lot of screen readers. Sometimes those don't get that. That's why like you said, note or important before it tells people, when those contrast, or not the contrast, when the emphasis pieces aren't read by assistive technology, like the italics or whatever. So you do have to think. You have to think around what you're doing, and sometimes it means changing up how you even wanted to word something to begin with.
Yeah. So this is still telling us that it's not quite like in this table style. So if we come over here and change it to a plain table, which it was a plain table anyway, I don't know why I thought it wasn't plain, but so we have gone through now and corrected all of the accessibility issues in this document. And we get a nice green check mark here, and we know that people with disabilities shouldn't have any trouble with this document. And so that's what you want to get to, is that nice green check mark when you're creating documents for folks. And I'm going to minimize that, and I'm going to actually open the handout that we had here. Some of these resources in here, again, a lot of helpful information in here. These are some of the major players here: A11Y, CAST, WC3, that's a Worldwide Web Consortium, WCAG. Those are the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, and those are referenced in something we're fixing to talk about in just a minute in procurement. And then WebAIM has so many helpful resources. Accessibility checkers, again, Microsoft's built in. WC3, this is an exhaustive list of evaluation tools. I mean, you click on this thing and there are so many tools in there, from website evaluators, the color contrast tools, software checking tools. I mean, if it's an accessibility evaluation tool, it's probably on this list, because this is a really big list. So if you want to find accessibility evaluation tools, I just go right there.
And that's actually one of the other questions we had in Q&A. It says, can you talk more about the evaluation step? We are a national higher education organization with approximately 500 employees. We are about to embark on a self-evaluation of digital accessibility.
Mhm.
How do we go about conducting that evaluation? Is it better to outsource? If we have to do it internally, how do we avoid the risks associated with not knowing what we don't know? Which is a
Right.
fabulous
Yeah.
question.
Yeah, you don't know what you don't know. So one of the things that I did years ago at A&M was put together a list of all of our resources that we were using. And once we had that list together, we started reaching out to our vendors and we started asking them for documentation about the accessibility of their tools. I'm going to scroll down here to procurement for a second. So one of the things that you can ask vendors for your software is a VPAT or ACR. They are both the same document. Some people still call it a VPAT. A VPAT is a blank template. An ACR, Accessibility Conformance Report, is a completed VPAT. And the vendors evaluate their own tools. They evaluate them against the WCAG guidelines, and they put all that information into this VPAT, and that's what they can give to their customers. And so when you gather up the accessibility conformance reports, you can look at those, and it tells you in detail what parts of those tools meet accessibility guidelines. And it will tell you whether it's fully compliant or partially compliant or not compliant at all. That way, number one, you know what you're getting into, and it helps you make a decision. If there's enough in that tool that doesn't meet accessibility conformance guidelines, maybe you want to look for an alternative. If there's not an alternative out there, and nothing right now in this world is 100% compliant. It's just not. And so you kind of have to weigh the pros and cons of using a tool that may not be as compliant as you'd like. But if you're going to use something, this tool, again, tells you what parts of that don't meet guidelines so that you can make alternative arrangements. So if you know you've got, I'm just going to use a video for example. If their video doesn't have captions, you have to make alternative arrangements. So if you've got somebody that's going to watch that has an impairment, you have to do something for them. So that's what these documents help you do, is make those decisions and weigh the risks, potential risk of using something that may not meet all the guidelines, or meet all the guidelines, at least that we definitely want them to meet.
And they can be tricky, especially if they are done by the companies themselves. Mm-hmm. Not even intentionally so, but they don't know what they don't know as well, unless they have an accessibility specialist doing the checking. So I put a link in the chat. And thank you, Elizabeth, for that understanding of VPAT link. But it's important to kind of familiarize yourself with what a good one looks like. Yep. So I highly recommend going and looking at Microsoft or Google and looking at their ACRs and or other places that have had third-party evaluations done. And then when you get something from one of your vendors, compare it against that and say, were they really thorough? Are they being really vague with their comments? And to also talk about, this is something you're doing internally. The accessibility community is your best bet. Like join the listservs.
Yes,
Get to know people, because those are the people that you can be like, hey, I think this is, but would you take a look at it? And that way you as an institution can learn from the people who have already done some of that work, and not feel as much like you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah. And when you get a completed VPAT, at the top of it, it tells you who completed it, whether or not it was internal or external. And so you want to follow up with the vendor on that VPAT. What's your timeline for making this compliant? How did you, especially if it's internal, how did you evaluate? You want to know how they evaluated. And then for me, a red flag is if you get one and it says everything's compliant. And it may be true, but if it says everything's compliant, you better believe I'm going back to them, and I want to know who evaluated it and how they evaluated it and how they know that they're 100% compliant. I mean, there are some out there, absolutely. But if it just says compliant, 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 compliant all the way through, and like there's no explanations or, we did this to make this compliant, I would question it. The way that you can evaluate your online documents is to use something like Accessibility Insights or Site Improve or Wave. And I thought I had Wave linked in here somewhere. Did I not?
I can find it and put it in the chat, Linda.
Yeah, let's put it in there. I thought I had that. But Wave, it's WAVE. It's a little add-on that you can add to your web browser, and it will evaluate anything that you click on, whether it's your own or somebody else's. And Site Improve is very similar. And some of these things are free, some of them are not. Wave is free. I believe Site Improve has free options. Accessibility Insights, I think that's something that you pay for. But I do believe they have an option to check your site for free, even through Accessibility Insights. Yeah, if you're going to do a self-evaluation, you can use tools like this, and you can gather the VPATs, and that certainly will help you. That's a great start on doing that audit. And then, you can document what's compliant, what's not compliant, and then decide from there where you want to go and prioritize how you want to work towards compliance or conformance. Does that help?
I believe so. I think that.
And then screen readers. I mean, gosh, again, a Google search of any of this stuff is going to bring up oodles and oodles of tools. But these are just some of the more well-known, more widely used items here. JAWS is a screen reader. It's fairly expensive. NVDA is a screen reader. It's free. Windows has a built-in narrator that you can use. And there again, there's just all kinds of free tools out there that you can take advantage of. The accessibility community really has kind of banded together and grown and just flourished. And I mean, you could reach out to the accessibility department at another institution, and I'd just be willing to bet you 100% that they'd be willing to help get you started. I've never met anybody that in the accessibility community, anyway, that wasn't willing to help another institution. So, and I mean, I'm willing to help. If you've got questions or something, you can email me, and I'll answer more questions.
So we did have a question about the links from the chat. I will curate all of those out of the chat into a document. I will put that with Linda's other document once we get this recording up on the ASC homepage, which will be under the ASC Live tab. There's a whole recording section of past recordings. And on that area, we have the documents and things linked. We do have an interesting question that just popped up. Will AI change the accessibility landscape? This is a flyer question. I'm very interested in this question as well, as this is going to be the basis for my dissertation topic. So what do you think, Linda?
I think AI is changing everything. I mean, Chat GPT, oh my goodness. It's like talking to a really knowledgeable human You can ask it questions. Now, they tell you that all the questions it answers may not be quite accurate, so you have to take some of that with a grain of salt. But I mean, I've gone in and asked it accessibility questions, and it has been spot on. Some of the AI, like art generation, man, I just heard a snippet of a conversation the other day that somebody submitted a photograph and I think won an award. And then it was found out that it wasn't really his photograph. It was something that was generated using AI. So, no, I think there is some going to change the landscape of everything. I think it's going to help improve accessibility because I think it can be used to create accessible content.
So I think it's interesting that you bring that up, because some other instances that people maybe don't associate with AI because they are thinking ChatGPT, generated text, etc. But anyone that's using PowerPoint and is using that designer feature, it's beautiful. It's excellent for those of us who are not graphic designers. However, you have to really think through the accessibility of your PowerPoints from the ground up, because Microsoft itself is creating things that its own checker then says are not accessible.
Yes, absolutely.
So there's like benefits and there's, some challenges that are going to happen, but using it to brainstorm for students who have issues getting started with writing because they feel overwhelmed or have anxiety. It's almost like having a tutor there to talk through things with you. It's such a fascinating thing that maybe in the future, this will be an entire ASC live subject. Stay tuned.
It can write code. I mean, it's amazing.
I think it's so new that we haven't seen a lot of the scholarship studies and things being done. But I think that just the conversations people are having around accessibility shows that, it'll change the landscape, I think, for some good and for some maybe not so great.
And what you brought up about PowerPoint, and that's why it's great that Microsoft has built this accessibility checker into all of their tools, even Outlook. I mean, it's even in the Outlook platform. So when you're doing your emails, you can check them. But it's just important to use that tool when you're creating, especially PowerPoints, because it can, again, walk you through those issues. And I mean, it's even going to tell on itself because some of the content that it's creating doesn't meet accessibility guidelines.
Well, we are at 2 minutes until the hour. So I want to thank you, Linda, for being here and sharing your information and having this conversation with me and with our attendees. I want to thank all of you attendees for your excellent contributions in the chat and your questions. We really appreciate you being here. And I hope that since you're here, you will take the next step and follow the link I just put in the chat to the Accessibility Summer Camp homepage. Probably by the end of tomorrow, our program will be live and you'll be able to see not just the keynotes that are on our homepage, but all of the speakers we will be having. And it is a lineup. Let me tell you, it's going to be a great summer camp this year. Thank you again, Linda.
Thank you.
I will share out. Can I put your email in the chat here, Linda?
Put my email. Let's go ahead and use my email, lindakitescott@gmail.com.
Is that all one?
Yes.
So if you want to follow up with our fabulous speaker, it is Linda Kite, as in the thing you fly in the air.
That's right.
Scott@gmail.com, all one word. Thank you for being here, everyone. Linda, thank you again.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it.
Have a wonderful afternoon.
Right.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.